Today, we're going to be looking at the worst flops in gaming history and ranking them on a tier list. The worst flop is S tier, and the most successful among these flops will be in D tier. What is a flop? Well, it's a game that failed to launch. It bombed, it crashed and burned. Got it? Good. Let's go. Game number 1. We're going to start out with a true stinker. A game that embodies what a flop is. The Lord of the Rings, Gollum. There are a lot of ways that a game can flop, and this game found a way to hit all of them. But the biggest one is the most obvious. Why would they make this game? Who wanted to play as Gollum? Of all the characters in Lord of the Rings, Gollum might be the least interesting to play in a video game. I would rather play a Shire dating sim than play as Gollum bumming around Mordor being a wretch. The concept stank, the gameplay stank, the graphics stank, and it hit all the other major markers of a flop too. It was cheaply made, and it didn't make enough money. They came out to apologize, which is pretty classic for a flop. You have to apologize about your game being bad. But they used ChatGPT to write the apology. While the studio didn't get shut down, they stopped making games and moved to being a publisher only, so they may as well have shut down. Gollum is the definition of an S-tier flop. Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a classic story of over-promising. According to the devs, this game was quadruple A, the first quadruple A game. Classic Ubisoft. Ubisoft started making Skull and Bones in 2013 after Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. I mean, if you don't remember, this was shortly after Stonehenge was built. Skull and Bones came out in 2024. So it took 11 years to make one of the most mid games ever. This game was overhyped, and it also took too long. By the time it actually came out, Sea of Thieves had already come out and taken its whole bars and flow. Even after all that time, the game just doesn't really have a lot going for it. You can tell that this game got redone from scratch multiple times throughout development. They blew over $120 million on this game. As far as the gameplay goes, there's just really not that much to say. You sail around as a pirate. It's just like Sea of Thieves, but worse. It definitely flopped in terms of sales, but there's a canyon between this and Gollum and some of the other games. And this game is still technically alive. You can buy it, you can play it online. There are even like 5 people playing it still. It's a functional video game. Skull and Bones gets a C tier. It's an embarrassment, it lost money, but it's not the biggest flop in the world. Redfall. A lot of you guys probably don't even know what this game is or that it came out. Redfall was an open-world, first-person shooter that really focused on co-op play. It will not be the only game like that on the list. It's a looter shooter. There's a lot of those. But the difference is that in Redfall, you fight vampires. Like, this is a hard game to talk about because it's about as unique and interesting as a pitch-perfect sequel. This just did not hit on any level. It sold basically nothing, the classic Dead on Arrival game, and that's even with it being free on Game Pass. It's almost hard to call this a disappointment because I don't think anyone was anticipating this game. They did give it a full year's worth of support, but in classic flop fashion, it killed the studio. This game is definitely A tier. A game so bland that people forgot to be mad at it after about a week. In 2016, a hero shooter came out that was supposed to change the game. It's crazy how there's so many hero shooters on this list too. It came from a major successful studio and it had colorful, fun character designs. It was completely new IP and the studio hoped it would be one of their games of the future. That game was Overwatch, and it's still around almost a decade later. Unfortunately, that also describes Battleborn, which was made by Gearbox, the Borderlands guys. Battleborn came out about 3 weeks before Overwatch, and it died pretty much as soon as Overwatch came out. This one's kind of sad, because by all intents and purposes, it was the kind of game that people wanted, and people liked it well enough, but it just came out at the wrong time. They kept updating it for over a year, which is impressive given that they dropped beneath 100 concurrent players by then. The crazy part is that Battleborn did have a unique edge. It was a hero shooter with MOBA elements. Now there's another shooter that does this, Deadlock, made by Valve, hero shooter with MOBA elements, and it's super successful. Really, Battleborn was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It gets a B tier, because while it did stay online for like 5 years, it was effectively dead after 3 weeks. This one is disappointing because it actually sounded cool. Even with Star Wars being stale, lightsabers and Jedi are cool. But everyone also likes Han Solo. What if you could play a game where you were cool outlaw smuggler, shooting blasters, talking smarmy? This concept sounds pretty much unfailable. Don't tell that to one of the goats of flopping, Ubisoft. What went wrong with this game? Well, there's kind of 2 things. The number one that people talked about around launch is that it went woke. They had a woman as the main character. Wah! There's the whole go woke, go broke concept. This tier list actually has a few games that had this pinned on them. I will say the bigger problem here is that the main character in no way says cool outlaw. I look at this and I do not see Han Solo, I just see a generic adventure game. They also messed up by being Ubisoft, so it was a boring generic adventure game. Nothing to write home about in either the story or the gameplay. It's like they thought the title alone would be enough to sell the game. For real, did anyone take a step back and think about the fact that they were making Star Wars Outlaws? Because you don't feel like an outlaw, and they also don't even have lightsabers, so I don't know what we're doing here. We're missing any Star Wars. The game did not sell well, and Ubisoft blamed it on Star Wars being out of style. I mean, ultimately it doesn't matter. They were the ones who took the L. This one goes in C tier because the game is bland, but it's a video game that you can still buy and play. The studio that made it still has their doors open, so that's something. This is the most baffling game on the list, which is crazy because we also have the Gollum game on the list. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is another looter shooter set in the Batman Arkham universe where you play as the Suicide Squad and try and kill superheroes. Now, who in their right mind thought that people wanted to play a looter shooter in the Batman Arkham universe? Those games were cool, but this concept does not work on any level, and Batman isn't even in the game. This is one of those games that was panned from the moment it was announced, but they kept on pushing. Just the most blatant attempt at a cash grab. They wanted Destiny in the DC universe, but no one cared about this game. Now, to be fair, this isn't even the first Batman-based shooter where you can't play as Batman. There was Gotham City Imposters, which against all odds was kind of fun. So maybe Suicide Squad could have been slightly successful if they had made a good video game. They did not make a good video game. It was a buggy mess on release, and the gameplay was bland and colored by numbers. It did not sell well. I really wanted to put this game in A or S tier. Really. But in good conscience, I can't put it higher than B because the game still hasn't been abandoned yet. It's just a bad video game, not an all-out disaster quite yet. Dragon Age: The Veilguard. This game is another one that got hit with the woke allegations pre-launch. Same old situation as Star Wars Outlaws. Except the Dragon Age creators did the one thing that you cannot do if your game is being called woke. They doubled down and started crashing out on people on the internet. The part that's crazy is when people don't want to just be honest about what they made. The devs both wanted to double down on what they were doing and also say that nothing had changed. Well, the first two Dragon Age games were very successful and they looked like this. And the new one looks like this. I mean, this game is the classic cocktail for a flop. Boring gameplay, bad writing, bad trailers, followed by the devs putting their foot in their mouth. The usual suspects. The biggest thing you just can't do is come out with a boring video game. We have thousands of games coming out every year. No one cares about a mid-Dragon Age game. So it sold bad, and people moved on quickly. With all that being said, BioWare is still around, and this isn't even their worst flop. And you can still play it. Not that people really want to. So Dragon Age: The Veilguard gets a C tier. This game almost deserves its own video. Concord was a hero shooter made by Firewalk Studios and published by Sony. The game was developed for 8 years, so they had at least 7 years to decide it was a bad idea. Sony has a few big series that it owns like God of War and The Last of Us, but they felt like they were missing out on live service games, so they picked up a few studios like Firewalk. They also published Helldivers 2, and that worked out pretty well, so they believed that Concord was their next big franchise. Someone said it had Star Wars-like potential. I kind of hope that person was fired when Firework got shut down. They announced Concord with this CG trailer in 2023, so no one cared, like most CG trailers. They dropped a beta a few months before release, and almost no one played it. The main thing that anyone heard about Concord was about its characters. The characters are, unique. That is to say, mad ugly. Hero shooters need characters with personality and flair to make you want to play them. People have to be excited to play as these characters, and no one wanted to play as any of these. The studio also insisted that you were wrong if you thought the characters were bad. Whatever, the real problem is that the characters are boring. This game outflopped all that came before it. I mean, it didn't even hit 1,000 players on PC on launch day. It was a disaster. Usually, when a game flops this bad, the studio will come out and apologize, and then they get flamed for a few weeks and everyone moves on. Then, months or years later, after the general gaming public has moved on, they can quietly end support for the game. With Concord, they failed so spectacularly that they just straight up pulled the game offline after 2 weeks and issued refunds. Sony also shut down Firewalk Studio. This is total defeat. You can't score a flop higher than this. This is the flop that other flops aspire to be, so it has to be an S tier. No Man's Sky came out of nowhere with an E3 trailer, RIP E3 by the way, that had just about everything. It would be the ultimate sci-fi space exploration game. You want to explore an infinite number of planets? You can do that. You want to play with your friends? We got that. You want to do space combat? You already know we got it. Game looked magical. And then it came out. All you could really do is fly around to planets and mine resources. And it didn't even have robust crafting or survival game elements. You were really just flying around to planets and looking around. and mining. Oh, and there was no multiplayer. Now, if this was the end of the story, it would be a huge flop. But then they turned around and added all that stuff they had talked to the game over time. Now everyone loves it. Also, they made a lot of money. This one is here mostly to show that a bad launch does not mean that your game is doomed. There is still hope. So No Man's Sky goes to D tier. Horrible launch. But at the end of the day, the game really worked. BioWare, the same people behind Dragon Age Veilguard, had an earlier flop. Really, they had 2 earlier flops. Shout out to Mass Effect Andromeda, just barely missed the list. But both of those pale in comparison to the disaster known as Anthem. Even though Mass Effect Andromeda sucked, BioWare had a good reputation. Up to that point, they basically hadn't missed. So when they showed off a really cool looking sci-fi shooter with an emphasis on jump packs and flying, people got hyped. If there's anyone who could successfully create an RPG looter shooter, here's another looter shooter, guys, it would be BioWare, right? They'd already done a lot of this groundwork in Mass Effect. Anthem is a very strange case. It might be the only one on this list that gave no real warning. This isn't Concord, which looked like a total disaster before it came out. Anthem looked exciting right up to the point when people could actually play it. The game was straight up unfinished. Terrible writing, nothing to do, and bad basic gameplay. Anthem hit a brick wall and was dead on arrival after being one of the most hyped games of the year. Maybe of the decade. This one is really hard to rank. The hype into complete disaster made me want to put this in S tier, but I don't think I can. BioWare lived on to see another day, and they supported Anthem for like 2 years somehow. I don't even know why. It's not like they turned it around like No Man's Sky. The game never got good, but they didn't abandon it. I think all that will get them an A tier. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I made a whole video on this one, so I'll make this quick. Marvel vs. Capcom was a very successful series going into Infinite, and it came out at the perfect time. This was when the MCU was at the peak of its powers, and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite had some of the hyped new Marvel characters in the game. Everything looked great, until we saw the game. I mean, just look at it. The graphics alone basically killed all the hype for this game. It looked old and rushed, and there was not a lot to do in the game. At the same time, a competing game, Dragon Ball FighterZ, was about to come out, and that game had aura. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite speed ran its end of life. They did one set of DLC a few months after the game came out, and then they abandoned it. And it looks like it killed the entire franchise. They're not going to come out with another one. Still, this one gets a B tier, because even though it flopped, it sold a lot better than some of these higher tier games like Redfall. It also has the dubious honor of probably being the best actual video game on the list. The gameplay was fine. It was just everything else about the game that killed it. This one might be the second most confusing game on the list. The idea of Super Smash Bros., but you're playing as Batman, Shaggy, and LeBron James is really dumb. If you told me that it failed because the concept was silly, like Suicide Squad, I would have believed you. Except when this game showed up out of nowhere into early access, it was really popular. It was actually really fun and leaned into its silliness just enough. It was one of the biggest games in the world. So it seems like a really weird pick for this list. Except, a few months after they put the game out on early access, they pulled it down and said they would be releasing it for real later. What? I don't get why you would pull down a game that works okay and that you're already selling stuff in to just say, we'll be back later. They came back a full calendar year later and released the game for real this time. Except, this time it was slower, and it played worse, and it didn't even have all the things that the beta had a year earlier. It just didn't make any sense. The real launch of the game was a disaster, and it quickly bled players. We don't know the real numbers, but the studio said that the game significantly underperformed and was part of a $100 million loss. Just baffling. It held on for about 9 months before Warner Bros. Games pulled the plug. This one gets a B tier. It's such a strange case because the early access launch went great, but the real launch just kind of collapsed. Well, that's about it. Glad we got some enjoyment out of these disasters. Thanks for watching.